Welcome to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, we break down what matters most from the big league club, including the debut of Ronny Mauricio. Of course, we go down on the farm to check in on Drew Gilbert, Luisangel Acuna, and much more. Joe takes a victory lap after a huge scoreboard week. And of course, we close out the show answering your mailbag questions. So subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. This summer, step out of the office and into the iconic with Cadillac, where the Made to Move sales event provides all the inspiration needed to set your email status to away. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac showroom for the Made to Move sales event today. And here's your reminder to subscribe to our show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch each episode on SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And Joe, as we always do, we jump right into things with the big league team. And there's a lot of news considering this team is not in the wild card race anymore. They are much closer to finishing with that top 6 pick, which I know has you excited as we keep our eyes on that. But I think right now we have to kick things off with the debut of Ronny Mauricio. This fan base has been waiting to see Ronny for a long time. He obviously was having a mammoth year in Syracuse. He got off to such a hot start. He did a good job being able to sustain that. He got to show some position flexibility down there too when they realized that, listen, he's going to be blocked at shortstop, but he is probably going to make his debut at the big league club this year. So we've now seen him at second base. Joe, you've watched Ronny essentially since he was inked as a massive international free agent signing, and that was a long time ago at this stage. What did you think of his debut and what tools did he show off?
Yeah, you don't have to remind me that it's been a long time because we can go back and talk some maybe one of the off-season shows we'll do like a throwback to like
Fernando Martinez
7 minor leagues, even before Fernando Martinez. I'm before that time even. But no, Ronny Mauricio, look, you saw what he's capable of doing. Strong wrist, bat speed. He's going to turn around velocity. Like sometimes you see Francisco Alvarez will get beat by velocity on occasion. Brett Baty will get beat by velocity on occasion. And I'm not saying Ronny will never, but he turned around that 96-mile-an-hour fastball from Logan Gilbert at 117 miles an hour, the hardest hit ball since I believe it was August of 2021, I think I saw on Twitter. And it was an Alonso one by a Met. So Ronny Mauricio hits the ball really, really hard. And he seemed like he was working pretty decent at bats. You know, we're talking about obviously the smallest of sample sizes, a weekend of baseball games. But it didn't seem like he was, wildly chasing out the zone too much. Obviously, like I said, hit the ball really hard. So you got to feel good about a guy that, if we're being honest, should have been here earlier than he was. But I know that's a lot of the talk now is that he should have been here earlier. I tend to just be like, oh, well, he wasn't. He's here now. And let's evaluate him now and going forward, because this month of September for Ronny Mauricio is absolutely massive, because if he performs and shows capability at second base, and Buck Showalter even kind of intimated that he's going to get some third base, he's going to get some left field. If he shows defensive versatility, defensive ability, really at any spot, it can play a huge factor in what the Mets actually do in the offseason. If Ronny Mauricio can lock up second base and McNeil plays left field more regularly, or if Mauricio can lock up left field and, McNeil's back at second, then you really maybe don't need to go pursue a left fielder in free agency. So obviously a great sign for the first weekend. Just really exciting to see all the kids. And I know here on Tuesday as we record, I think it's the first time that all of the baby Mets are going to be in the lineup at the same time. So pretty exciting, and obviously love to see 117 miles an hour at that trajectory too. It was like a low liner that just kept rising and obviously went over the right fielder's head. So a great first weekend for Ronny Mauricio, without a doubt.
It was exciting. You could see the physical tools, right? His build, he's always been very tall and very wiry, but he started to really put on weight over the years. I want to say, Joe, he was 100 and maybe 60 pounds when they signed him. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
And he looks well over 200 pounds right now. And like you said, the amount of power he can generate out of that frame. And we always use the word power, right? But we don't just mean hitting home runs. We're not just thinking
Right.
Pete Alonso when we talk about power. We're talking about driving the baseball hard, especially in this era where you see every outfielder with a card exactly where to stand, where those extra base hits are even harder to come by. The game is becoming even more athletic. There's data that's giving you the best place to stand that you'll probably, be most likely where the ball could be hit or at least near it. Where if you hit the ball like Ronnie does, and not a lot of guys on the Mets do, it doesn't matter where you're standing. The ball is just going to absolutely fly. So it's great to see him making that kind of contact. Of course, there's a spark with him. We saw the stolen bases as well, which I think at this point in Ronnie's development with how big he's gotten, it's not that he's just a sprinter. I think there's actually some baseball running IQ with him. So I thought that was really impressive as well. And the arm stood out to me when making turns on double plays. When there was obviously the play Francisco Lindor had against Seattle was one of the greatest plays we've seen across baseball this season from a shortstop. But the way Ronnie turned and made that throw goes to show you how strong of a kid that he is. So it's exciting. There's always juice around the park when a big time prospect comes up. And it also is helpful too when the team is hitting home runs. And we saw that from Pete Alonso at the end of the Mariners series. 2 home runs for Pete. Quietly, Joe, very quietly, Pete Alonso is 3rd in the big leagues right now in home runs. And to be honest with you, it's probably not very long from now where he moves up, because Shohei Ohtani, who has 44, Matt Olson, who has 44, they're the only 2 people ahead of Pete Alonso. Kyle Schwarber's 1 behind Pete with 40. Ohtani is dealing with what sounds like a sore oblique, and we're going to get, more on that. If I get he's a competitor, I don't know why Ohtani is, risking his body like he is at this point for that Angels franchise, but that's a different conversation. This could be truly an NL East home run derby race to finish the year. When you look at Olsen, you look at Schwarber, and then you look at Alonso. Alonso hits them in bunches. We've seen him finish hot before on a season stretch. Obviously, a lot of the conversation around Alonso has been, will the Mets extend him? Is he going anywhere? They've kind of shut that down. We think Pete's going to be a Met in at least 2024. But I think the bigger point is, Joe, this is the perfect way to look at it. When Alonso goes, the Mets go, right? As we've seen, the Mets have played okay. I mean, they took 2 out of 3 from the Mariners, one of the hottest teams in baseball. You look at the series against the Rangers, it felt like they could have won all 3 of those games. It's just the state of the roster right now. They're a little thin in certain areas. But Alonso, when he goes, the Mets go. And just like that, Joe, Alonso could finish with the most home runs in baseball this season.
He very well can. I like you said, Shohei Ohtani should just get whatever elbow procedure he needs. If it's Tommy John, if it's something else, I don't know. His agent seemed to indicate he's inevitably going to get it. So just make inevitably now, because that's probably better for him in the long run. Matt Olson's been struggling in the home run department. He's been stuck for a while. I think has like 1 home run over his last 3 weeks or something like that. So he hasn't been as hot. Schwarber just hits him in bunches. Pete hits him in bunches. And look, in the Mets history, they have 6 seasons in which a player's hit 40 or more home runs. Pete Alonso owns 50%. 3. Now 3 of the 6 times in Mets history that it's happened. And obviously he has a 37 under his belt as well. So clearly one of, if not the most prolific home run hitter in baseball. And the big picture thought, like you said, Connor, we think Pete Alonso is going to be a Met in 2024. It would be great if they extended him this offseason, but it may be something that we're talking about again this time next year. But look, it's exciting to watch Pete Alonso every single day as a Met, and it shows the type of competitor he is. The effort that you're seeing from him in a lost season, the effort you're seeing from Francisco Lindor, the effort you're seeing from Brandon Nimmo, guys like that already have big contracts or big expectations. And even if the team is not performing, they're still going out playing every single day and busting their rear on a daily basis. So it's a great thing to see that from Pete, but we should expect nothing less, because that's what he's been his entire time as a Met.
All right, this is the time of the show where it's like our DJ Stewart corner at this point. We talk about DJ Stewart at the top of the show each week, and for good reason. It almost feels like, Joe, I know you and I and plenty of people are like, when is this right? Like, when is the rug going to be pulled out from under us on this? When does it all end? It's, it was a great run, but a guy came up and got hot, and that's it. And now at this point, you have to have the conversation, right, with DJ Stewart, who, since last Monday has hit another 4 home runs, right? He had the 2 home run game against Texas on Wednesday. He hit another home run at the first game of that series. He hit a home run in the second game against Seattle. And he's not totally all home run or bust. He's drawn a few walks here or there. He does have some other hits. It's just fascinating to me, Joe, with Stewart. We go back to this conversation of, this is a former first-round pick. It didn't work out for him in Baltimore early in his career. He clearly has a lot of power in his bat. He's made some plays in the field that have surprised the absolute heck out of me. For a guy built like him, he's listed 210. He looks even more burly than that, but he's had a good read on a couple plays in the outfield. With Stewart right now, Joe, does the conversation at some point switch to, maybe this guy is viewed as the legitimate bench bat for the Mets going into next year? I personally, no matter how great of a year Stewart finishes with, I think the Mets are going to go into next year with a solidified outfield, guys that are expected to play starter reps. And I don't think Stewart will be handed that. I just think the nature of the way this team operates in the offseason, that would surprise me. But that doesn't mean he's not playing for a roster spot right now. And with the state of the Mets right now, we see how often Starling Marte is hurt at this point of his career. Nimmo is a guy that you can't play him 90% of a full season's games in center field. The body it doesn't do well for him. It doesn't do well for a lot of guys at this level. The 4th outfielder on a team, or the 5th outfielder on a team, plays a lot of baseball for a big league club. Do you think we're starting to shift towards that conversation with DJ Stewart?
I think we are. Look, the Mets are overdue for one of these kind of, I hate to say random, but these kind of like random minor league signings that just
it's a reclamation project. He was a failed first rounder for another team. That's what it is.
Absolutely. And, maybe he found something. I know he had credited, I believe, Colin Hetzler, the Mets AAA hitting coach, with helping him with kind of like a toe tap mechanism, which has helped him out. At this point, when you look ahead to 2024, and obviously we have another month of baseball, and maybe DJ Stewart hits 175 in September, and then our conversation shifts. But where we stand right now, the Mets are not going to be in a big 40-man roster crunch this offseason. They don't have many guys that they're realistically going to add to the 40-man to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. And there's obviously a lot of guys on the 40-man that are currently playing for the Mets that will likely not be on the 40-man next year. I don't see a reason why DJ Stewart can't remain on the 40-man roster. I believe he's arbitration eligible for the first time, so it'll be an inexpensive, probably less than $1 million. And you could take him to Port St. Lucie. And like you said, Connor, he could compete for a 4th outfield spot, a 5th outfield spot. And I'll tell you, when they signed DJ Stewart to a minor league deal last offseason, that might as well have just breezed under the desk, like paid no real mind to. I was like, oh, that's cool. I remember that name. And then that was the extent of how much I worried about it. And obviously he's showing to be much more than that. And the defense has impressed me. Like you said, the diving catch in the gap, running down the ball right near the wall. DJ Stewart showing, moderate defensive chops. He's obviously striking out at a high rate, a 30.7% strikeout rate. So that's not exactly sustainable in a daily type of role playing. But look, this is a kind of almost random minor league signing that could develop into a future role player on the 2024 Mets. And that's frankly as good an outcome as I think you could have hoped for.
It's kind of cliche, and it's definitely, just an old baseball saying, but there's no denying that Stewart plays with a lot of heart. I think that's why Mets fans have gravitated to him so quickly, is that he's a guy that's a power hitter. You're looking for him to hit the long ball in your lineup. You're not expecting him to bat 300 or constantly draw walks. Like you said, Joe, he's going to strike out. But he almost felt like a guy that you look at and you go, okay, give him a glove and stick him out in a corner. And he plays his heart out in the outfield, and he's had big moments. And he's an exciting guy to root for because he is the classic guy of clinging on to his big league career for dear life. And this is probably maybe his last real shot, honestly. Like, he might have been able to hang around the minors and come up in a depth role for a struggling organization if he hung around AAA long enough. But this is probably his last real shot to carve out a role with an organization that's sustainable, and he's taken full advantage of it. And I think the Mets season has switched so much with storylines, right? They opened the season with, let's be real, high-priced veteran free agents. And I don't use the word overpaid because whatever somebody pays you in sports is what you've made your worth. Good for you. But the Mets spent above market last year for a lot of guys that, quite honestly, didn't perform anywhere near expectations. And it left the fans with a sour taste, I think. No matter what they thought of those guys as people, it left them with a sour taste from watching them as competitors, especially when some of them were traded and maybe found new life with another team or whatever it may be. And the second half of the season, especially since the Mets have fallen out of the wild card picture, is rooting for the exact opposite kind of player. And take that for what you will, but it's the guy that isn't making really much of any money compared to these other contracts. He barely has a place on the roster. He can go, 1 for 10 in a 3-game series and be sent back down to AAA for somebody else. Everything is under a microscope with a guy like that. And I think that's why Mets fans have enjoyed watching DJ Stewart so much, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of at nature for a fan. You want to root for
the underdog.
The underdog. You want to root for the hard hustler, which is why I've always referenced guys like Jett Williams, guys like Drew Gilbert, the guys like the old adage of their jerseys dirty after every game. Like those kind of players, as long as they actually perform and hit or do something like tangible statistically, fans are going to gravitate to those people over the flashy kind of player. That's just kind of the general New York, and I'd say even specifically the New York Met fan base, like more of a blue collar fan base, that I think we gravitate a little more to those type of players.
So, Joe, we've only gotten to see a handful of games from Brett Baty since his return. Obviously, all the baby Mets are up now, and we saw Baty make a great barehanded play in the field. He's only gone 2 for 8, with his limited appearances so far. But one, I want to ask you, do you think Baty is a little bit more comfortable upon his return after a really tough beginning of 2023? And two, what are you looking for from Baty in the month of September? Something that he can carry over into spring of next year?
So Billy Epler was on, I believe, MLB Network Radio, and he talked about the same thing we've talked about for like a month plus, about how the expectations for 2024, when you talk about preseason odds, won't be the same as 2023. And kind of just threw it into that whole spiel. He was like, there's going to be a lot more younger players in the lineup. Just kind of threw, like, almost felt like a throwaway quote, but I grabbed it. Brett Baty is going to be this team's third baseman next year. So if there's any thoughts of, even if he has a poor September, if there's any thoughts of like turning to Matt Chapman or something like that on the market, I think Brett Baty is going to be the opening day third baseman. And like you said, Connor, the barehanded play was great to see. At the plate, I mean, it's 8 at-bats, couple hits, hit a couple balls hard in the air. Like he had a liner to left field gap that got ran down. That's got to happen. He does look a little more relaxed than he did, because you could tell when he was on the verge of being sent back down, his facial expression kind of looked like someone who didn't even want to be at the plate when he was up there. So he does look a little more relaxed. And what I want to see the rest of September, some consistency at third base. I don't need him to make all the flashy plays. Like the barehanded play was great, but the plays you're supposed to make those plays. Offensively, I want to see him get back to his general approach, which is on base and extra base hits. Like I want to see him work counts. I want to see him take walks. I want to see him spraying liners gap to gap, and then the home runs will come with that because he's a big, strong kid. So that's really what I want to see for the rest of September. And look, the reality is Brett Baty is most likely going to be the opening day third baseman in 2024. If you take what Billy Epler said and run with that a little bit, but I feel fine about Baty. I don't think I'm any more down on him than I was, or maybe any more higher. But we revisit this in 3 or 4 weeks as we get ready for starting off-season shows, which is kind of depressing. Like we're getting really close to it's just turning into an off-season show again.
Yeah, but you and I love the off-season. It's
we
our
do,
favorite.
But We do, but we also like baseball.
That's okay. That's fair.
Yeah,
that is very fair.
yeah.
We do
We also
enjoy
like
actually
baseball.
talking about the
Yeah.
tangible items from the team
Yeah.
actually playing the game, not just playing spreadsheet GM as Joe and I love to do. All right, so our last big one here with the Big League Club. Got to talk about Kodai Senga. I basically run out of things to say about Kodai Senga at this point. I mean, it's if Corbin Carroll didn't have this year that was such a rare rookie year in terms of the home runs and steals, and Carroll has slowed down in the second half, but it just doesn't matter at this point. It feels like Senga would be a bigger rookie storyline, of course, but I mean, Joe, his last 5 starts, all quality starts. He's made it to 6 innings in all of them. He's made it to 7 innings in 2 of them. He's striking out batters at a much higher rate. I mean, that's what's crazy to me. The K/9 at over 15 in the last start against Seattle. He's got 3 wins in those 5 starts. I know people don't care about wins as much anymore, especially when you see he didn't get a win against the Mariners when he deserved one. But I mean, even the walks the overall whip seems to be down right now, Joe, where he's not even getting himself into trouble that always seemed to cost him an inning, right? He'd have that one inning where he'd get himself into trouble, and whether he got out of it or not, it would keep him to pitching 5 innings. We're now at the point with Senga, I mean, going all the way back to July 15th, he has quality starts in 7 of those 9 starts. I mean, he's just been lights out for this team. You could say it with your chest. I'll say it with my chest. He's pitched like an ace, honestly. He's pitched like an ace when nobody that was paid to or expected to met those expectations for this club. If Senga is going to build on this next year or even come close to replicate it, the Mets are in really, really good shape if they could fill out this staff.
Kodai Senga has been incredible, and you've seen just like the growth throughout the season. Early on in the season, he would have good starts here and there, but it was a lot of battling. It was a lot of trying to get to 5 innings. He'd have 90 pitches when he started the 5th, or things like that. He was struggling with the strike zone, which it was an adjustment with the new baseball. It was an adjustment with the new slope. It was an adjustment with just being in a new country, not knowing. Honestly, right. I don't think Kodai Senga would know where he was when they dropped him in St. Louis for the first time, for example. He had no idea where he was. But it's been so much better over the last month plus. He's pitching to like a 2.5 ERA, striking out everyone. The ghost fork is literally one of the top 3 pitches in baseball on effectiveness for batting average against. I mean, you're seeing strikeouts and you go on Baseball Savant. I love to look, and I don't do this for any other pitcher. I'm only intrigued at Kodai Senga's numbers with this. When he strikes a batter out with the ghost fork, you go on Baseball Savant, you click on the Mets game and you go to the live at bat, and it'll give you the metrics on the pitch and striking out guys with induced vertical breaks of 41 inches, 39 inches. Like these ghost forks are moving like 3 feet plus, which is just absurd. And like you said, Connor, big picture, when you think about 2024, Kodai Senga being, even if you called him a number 2, whatever, like that's much different than our preseason expectations. And we were high on Senga, wanted the Mets to sign him the whole offseason, whole thing. We were like, if he could be a number 3, that would be fantastic.
Right.
He's exceeded those expectations. And I think it's now time for us, fans, everybody, to shift what the expectations are for Kodai Senga. I think he's better than a number 3. I think you can look at him going into 2024 as a number 2 type of starter who may end up being like the Mets number 1. Like hypothetically, if they were to sign our guy Yoshinobu Yamamoto, like I think they'd give Kodai Senga the opening day start over him, for example, which in turn makes him the number 1 starter. But if he's pitching like a number 2 at 5 years and $75 million, that is one of the better contracts that the Mets have issued in years and years. And we've talked about the Taiwan Walkers and some other good contracts that the Mets have done. 5 for 75 for a pitcher of Senga's quality, if he's able to continue on this trajectory, is something we'll look back at as one of the steals that the Mets have done in their history, potentially.
I've become obsessed with the idea of signing Yamamoto to the point, Joe, where I'm just setting myself up for disappointment. The thought of having the ghost fork and the yo-yo curve and 2 headline Japanese pitchers is just, it would be incredible energy around Citi Field with those guys. And Yamamoto, obviously, he's 25. So you're talking about a guy that could be a fixture in your rotation for a long time to come. And under Senga's contract, we already expect that of him. So it's just been awesome. He gives you a great reason every time he's pitching. It's must see TV at this point. And as you and I are always looking, we're looking towards the future and what that means for this team. And Senga's been a big bright spot. So let's go down on the farm as we always do. We will start in Binghamton AA with this team because listen, most people have left Syracuse, by the way. If you haven't noticed, you got to watch them with the big league club. But looking at Binghamton right now, Joe, of course, our weekly Drew Gilbert and Luisangel Acuna update. What's the latest around those two?
So all the guys we're going to talk about didn't have like massive statistical weeks, but Drew Gilbert, Luisangel Acuna both got on base at big numbers over the last week. Luisangel Acuna, when he gets on base, he steals. So that's the name of the game with him right now. What I want to see big picture from Acuna, he only has 2 extra base hits since joining the Mets. I'm sorry, 3 extra base hits since joining the Mets organization. So I want to see him start spraying more liners into the gaps and using his speed. It seems like a lot of his hits are, grounders up the middle, liners right at, the center fielder or left field or right field or whatever into the outfield. I want to see him start to get into that extra base hit power. He's not going to be a home run hitter, but he's someone that I think should get doubles and triples, and he hasn't really done that much since joining the Mets. Drew Gilbert, similarly high on base this week. Didn't do much as far as hitting, but feel fantastic about him. He's been the best performer of the players that the Mets acquired at the trade deadline. And, he's on a trajectory to start next year in AAA. And if he's in AAA to start, that means he's a couple injuries and performing away from getting that call to the major leagues. So, 2 guys that are up near the top of my farm system rankings. Acuna still hanging number 1, Gilbert at number 3, are guys that 2024 is going to be big for them because, look, at the end of the day, we could break down their stats on a week-to-week basis. They both have under 30 games in the Mets organization. So it's really just truly a small sample size of 2 highly talented players that are widely respected in the industry.
And then, of course, our look all the way down in Brooklyn, high A ball here, Joe. We always talk about Jett Williams, and we'll go to him in a second, but I saw a home run from Ryan Clifford that was literally hit out of sight. I watched it 10 times. It was hard to track where the ball was going or where it landed. I know Clifford hasn't really been consistent since arriving in the Mets organization in the Verlander trade, but when he connects, his home runs are much different than your typical minor leaguer.
It's as good raw power as the Mets have in their system, if not the best raw power in the Mets system right now. With
like Alvarez and Pete Alonso come to mind?
Yeah, exactly. Like
right.
it's in that realm where it's 65, 70 grade on a 20 to 80. Right now, his biggest problem is he's striking out way too much since joining the Mets. He has 47 strikeouts in 27 games. So that's not a sustainable rate for him. So he has to work on trimming that down. But you can't teach that power. That is for sure. And he is drawing walks, so he will get on base a little bit. But like you said, Connor, that home run this week was a big league homer. Loud, barreled, right center, smoked. So still feel good about Ryan Clifford. We need to figure out where he's going to be positionally. The Mets have let him play a little right, play a little first. So we have to figure out as we go ahead, which we still have time. He should either he may start next season back in Brooklyn, or he's going to be in AA Binghamton. So we still have a little more time to figure out what he is defensively. But offensively, let's see some more consistent contact to go with the power, because it's a clean left-handed swing. It looks like a swing that shouldn't be swinging and missing at the rate that it is.
All right, so we'll wrap this up with Jett Williams, who it feels like, Joe, a bad week for Jett is just the fact that he didn't go off at the plate, but he always finds a way to get on base no matter what it feels like with him.
Drawing walks, stealing bases, and that home run he hit this past weekend was very impressive. And if you go on my Twitter, you could see the video of it, or SNY Mets also has the video of it. He turned around a 94-mile-an-hour fastball up and in, which is something that it can take prospects a long time to learn to be able to do that. He just jumped all over and put it way over. Like, I don't know if the Red Sox, does every one of their affiliate have green monster, because I went to Portland, their AA facility, and they have a green monster. I know their home for spring training has a green monster. So I think they just have green monsters at every level.
I like that.
I love it. But like Jett just smacked it over that green monster, cleared it, not even close. So obviously, like you said, it was walks and steals in that one home run. He didn't hit much this week, but Jett Williams is obviously one of the most stock up prospects in the Mets system. And I expect him to start next year in AA as a 20-year-old. So obviously we are very high on Jett, and we'll see how he hammers out the rest of this season. And I know the playoff run and push is going on for Brooklyn.
If you want to see Jett, the Met, and other Cyclones in action, Brooklyn continues their playoff push as they host the Wilmington Blue Rockets this week in Coney Island for their final regular season home series of the season. Promotions include multiple food and drink specials, post-game fireworks, and post-game run the bases. Also on Saturday, the first 1,500 fans will receive a Pete Alonso walk-off bobblehead, and on Sunday, the first 1,500 fans will receive a team baseball card set. For tickets and full details, visit brooklyncyclones.com. And this is your reminder, you're listening to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your shows. All right, Joe, time for my least favorite time of the show because you crushed me in the scoreboard. So let's recap these real quick. Over-under push was set at 2 for Pete Alonso home runs in the next 5 Mets games. Joe, you went with the risky push. I went with the under. You won. You got a point. Over-under push was set at 3 for Rafael Ortega hits in the next 5 Mets games. Joe, you went under. I went with push. I don't know why. Joe, you get the point. He had 1 hit. So over-under push.
He had the walk-off. He had the walk-off right before
it.
The most important hit,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The over-under push for Luisangel Acuna stolen bases in the next 6 Binghamton games was set at 2. Joe, you went over. I went over. He had 2. No points awarded for each of us. We were close. Over-under push was at 6 for Drew Gilbert hits in the next 6 Binghamton games. He had 5. He just missed. Joe went with push. I went with over. Neither of us get a point. Over-under push was set at 6 Jett Williams walks in the next 6 Cyclones games. Joe, you went with push again, which is insane on such a random number of 6, and you got it. He had 6 walks. I went under. Joe, you get a point. You went 3. You went for 3 points this week, Joe. I went for 0. You are now leading the season. You were down 17-18. You are now up 20-18. I have some ground to make up. So let's kick it off with this week. Over-under push is set at 5 for Ronny Mauricio hits in the next 7 Mets games. Joe, you won. You get the floor for the first one.
Riding the wave. Over. I'm going over on Ronnie. I think he's going to keep hitting, and we'll be talking this time next week, more positive Ronny Mauricio stats.
All right, I got to take some risk here. I will go with the push of 5 hits for Mauricio in the next 7 games. The next one, Mauricio steals in the next 7 games, is set at 2. The push is set at 2. Joe, I'm going to go... Wow, this is tricky. I'm going to actually go with the under here for Mauricio. I'm going to think he goes for about 1, maybe even less. Where are you going for Mauricio steals?
I will go under as well. I think he's going to be 1 or none. Yeah, I think we're going to see a home run from Ronny Mauricio.
That's what I was going to say. One of those hits is going to be a home run.
There. Yeah, right. One of those hits are going over the fence, and you can't steal all the bases.
Here's a fun one. Shout out to our producer, Jeff. Over-under push is set at 7 for, plot twist, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander combined earned runs allowed on Wednesday when they face each other, Joe. What do you got?
Oh, man. I'll go under. I think it's going to be pretty close, but I'll go under. And I just think it is all kinds of funny in a way, since we have interesting senses of humor on this show. I think it's all kinds of funny that Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, like, imagine we had this conversation in spring training, like on September 5th, Max Scherzer versus Justin Verlander, and neither are with the Mets.
Yeah, it's an AL matchup. I will go with the over here. I am a person that roots for chaos, and I like to pick the ones that are random, right? Like, really, with these, who the hell knows? I pick what I want to root for, and I hope I just need one of them to get lit up to hit this over here. I just need one of them to give up 5 or 6 runs. I will go with the over. Scherzer, The tricky thing is here, Joe, it's earned runs allowed. With Scherzer's forearm situation, I don't even know how far he will pitch into this game. And that obviously that's not something we're rooting for. Hopefully Max is okay, but this is the story with Scherzer right now. When it comes down to September towards the end of seasons, he is a guy that's at this age has broken down a few times. So we'll see where that goes.
Been the way the last couple of years. The Dodgers, he couldn't couldn't make,
Mets.
Yeah, the Mets.
Now the Rangers.
And now this. Yeah.
All right, the next one, over under push is set at 5 for Drew Gilbert hits in the next 6 Binghamton games. Joe, I will go with the under for Drew Gilbert hits in the next 6 games.
I will push this one. I think 5 is a good number. I hit on a couple of pushes last week. I trust our odds maker, Jeff. So I'll ride push on Drew Gilbert.
All right, this last one, Joe, it's all yours. Over under push at 6 is the number for Jett Williams walks in the next 6 Cyclones games. A reminder, you pushed for Williams walks at 6 last week and won.
It's so hard to bet this one because it literally could be any which way. He could decide this is going to be the week I hit and I don't draw as many walks. But if he doesn't hit, he draws walks. I think I'll go under because I'm going to go out on a limb and say Jett will not have a second week in a row when he hits sub 200. So I think he'll hit a little more this week than walk. So I'll say under 6.
I'll push. Maybe this is just who Jett is at this point. Every time we try to challenge the books, this is who he is. It's alarming to think the guy could have another 6 walks in 6 games when he just did that last week. But if anybody could do it, it's Jett Williams, the Brooklyn Cyclones. And that is our scoreboard predictions for the week. Hopefully some of you guys have been playing along, and hopefully some of you guys have a higher score than Joe and I. He has 20. I have 18. Let's get into the mailbag, Joe. And this is a question dear to your heart from SLS. Thoughts on Edwin Diaz returning this season? Does it help him to see some real game action before the long offseason? We all know it would help more morale-wise, but is it a big risk to take?
It's funny. I actually was talking to somebody about this on the golf course I was playing this last weekend and talk about Edwin Diaz. And I think there is some value to breaking that kind of mental threshold. So if he has to be 100+%, zero limitations, zero everything. But if he clears everything and he's 100% ready to go, I see value in activating him and having him pitch once or twice just to get over his head that he made it back and he did it, instead of now having to wait all the way until February, March to get into a spring training game. And then it's kind of breaking that mental threshold, though he has said publicly that he feels good. He doesn't feel any fear of anything. I still think it would be reassuring for him and frankly, the Mets organization just to see him back out there throwing. So if he clears everything and he's healthy, go for it. Activate him for the last weekend of the season or something like that and have him throw a game or two and just, give him that confidence going into the offseason.
I'm with you. I think with Diaz, first off, you started this off exactly right, that it's not something that you push to do. It's something that if Diaz feels almost over 100%, like he feels comfortable or he's throwing off a mound, obviously he's doing bullpen sessions. He feels like, okay, I'm what I once was, not that long ago. Then you go that route and you try to, because it makes you feel good rather than we're going to be on pins and needles when he pitches in spring next year. Being like, oh my God, Edwin Diaz is back. Can he get back up to form? So there is something about real live game action at the major league level and the value to that. So, and I'll say this is a good time to say this, Joe, we knew how good Edwin Diaz is, and we knew there's no replacing him. It's literally the first things we said when we did a podcast after he got hurt. I think I underestimated the things away from the actual baseball field with Diaz in terms of impacting the team this year. I think he brings a different energy. He is clearly one of the most beloved guys in the entire clubhouse, and the way he really dictates the energy of the fans. It is crazy to say an injury that we knew had massive ramifications, and somehow David Robertson was near perfect.
Fantastic.
The first half of the season, he was near perfect. You couldn't ask for a better David Robertson, but between the trickle effect of the bullpen to the energy to the clubhouse, Diaz's loss was, it just couldn't be sold enough how vital it was and how much of a heavyweight blow it was to this team.
We stated how big it was, but even we understated it. I totally agree. Just all the compounding factors. And I'll tell you from a confidence standpoint, we would go into games last year and you and I would text about it, and we'd text in our group chat with Jeff. Like when it was the 7th inning, it was just like, you just got to get through one more inning. And then Diaz could potentially come in because he had some 4-out saves, some 5-out saves. Or if you had to go 9th, like it was kind of lock, stock, done. Like that is the confidence that Diaz brought to us as fans, which I have to assume was felt by the players on the field, right? That they knew we got to the 9th, we're good. Like we're going to get through this because we have Edwin. So obviously huge loss, but huge credit to him too for his work ethic to get through this. Obviously a significant injury, and one of the grosser injuries, honestly, that you could have. Having that happen the day before my birthday, of course, because that's when I'll remember it. The day before my birthday, which was just a sick prank by the world. But having that significant injury and us having the conversation just 7 months later, 6.5 months later, whatever it is, like, and we're having a conversation about Edwin Diaz pitching in a major league game in the next 3 weeks. Just that's an absolute credit to the Mets doctors, rehab staff, and then Edwin's work ethic, because the doctors and them could do their job, but if the patient doesn't do theirs, it doesn't really matter. So a huge credit to Edwin for getting to the point where we're having this conversation. And that just makes me feel really good about where we're going to look at in 2024 with Diaz back.
The next one is from Kyle. He said, if the Mets sign Yamamoto, which would be great, how would they structure a rotation that has 2 pitchers used to pitching every 6 days? Would they have to consider a 6-man rotation? Love the pod. Thanks, Kyle. So, Joe, I kind of want to tweak this or have a follow-up to Kyle's question. Does Senga pitch on normal rest next year because he is starting to become more acclimated, or is this a actual thing that you have to think about when adding Yamamoto?
It is something you'll probably have to think about. I certainly can't say with any assurance what Senga's 2024 plan is. I know that like Masahiro Tanaka adjusted and became an every 5th day pitcher, but Shohei Ohtani is a different example because he also hits, so maybe that alters it. But Ohtani's been in every 5 days rest, 6-man type of thing his whole time in America. He's never been a normal rest pitcher. So it's not impossible that Senga is that. But I think that's something we'll figure out in spring training. But certainly if you bring in Yamamoto, at bare minimum, you're going to treat the rotation the same way you did this year, which is give Yamamoto an extra day when you can and have a 6th starter on hand. But in a world that Senga is what he is, which, you might see some changing to that, like with the college game being once a week, with, high school being so infrequent and everything as you develop. And even in the minor leagues, as you get later in the season, those guys move to like a once a week schedule, due to innings caps and things like that. I wouldn't be shocked if we're not across baseball getting closer to a 6-man rotation becoming a reality, just kind of almost normal. But it's very up in the air on what Senga is. But certainly, like I said, if they sign Yamamoto, at the bare minimum, you're going to treat the rotation the same way you did this year with Senga and just Yamamoto taking his spot. At worst, you might be one of the first teams to roll out a semi-regular 6-man rotation.
That would be really interesting to watch because we know Yamamoto's been linked to the Mets. We know how much they value protecting Senga, which they should. I mean, he's a valuable asset and you want to get the most out of him, and him being healthy is how you do that. It doesn't bother me. I'll say it right now. Like, it's not a deterrent. It doesn't deter me at all. I would look at it and go, I use this name all the time because it's the perfect placeholder name. But if you went into the offseason and you signed Yamamoto to a massive deal, which great, do it. You have Senga, and say you sign a Jordan Montgomery level starter or somebody in that mold. I mean, then you look at the rotation next year and you just need to have the depth to be able to pitch around that with Yamamoto. And honestly, Joe, what's interesting about that probably comes down to how the Mets as an organization internally view not only David Peterson and Tyler McGill next year, who have had some moments this second half, but also Mike Vassell, right? I mean, I think that would be the name that probably matters most into that equation.
Yeah, Mike Vassell, Dom Hamill, Christian Scott, Justin Jarvis, like specifically the first three, Vassell, Hamill, and Scott, those were names that Billy Epler mentioned specifically as starting pitching depth in that MLB Network radio interview that I mentioned earlier on in the show. So I think a lot of the depth will begin to become internalized, but certainly what they're going to have to find multiple starting pitchers for this rotation. So if they're operating on a 6-man, I think you certainly need to sign 3. Like you need to sign, call it Yamamoto, call it someone in the Jordan Montgomery mold.
Yeah.
And then let's see if we can find one of those 1-year reclamation projects. Like Luis Severino, will he sign a 1-year deal? I know he's been bad most this year, but is that someone you could get your hands on and turn back into something on a 1-year deal? And he doesn't have to relocate very far. So there's obviously going to be a lot of time for those conversations about what starters they pursue, because there's a lot of them in the free agent market. But if they go down the Yamamoto track, they may really need to sign 3 legitimate starters.
No, you're right. You take on a guy that's a project that's taking a 1-year deal to reprove his value. And honestly, that could be Severino. That could be Giolito with how poorly things have gone for him since, being moved twice. So, and those are the guys that, listen, you get in the pitching lab and you see something that other people don't, you tweak it, and you get the guy to pitch to a 4 ERA while making all of his starts as your 5th or 6th man. And shout out to Jose Quintana, man. I'm glad the Mets didn't trade him. He's a good piece for them to have next year.
He's going to be so quietly good for the Mets next year. Like, we're not even going to be paying attention. He's going to be like the 4th starter or something like that. And we're just going to look up at the end of the year and he's going to have like, I don't know, a 3.97 ERA and have made all of his starts and thrown 194 innings. And we're going to be like, wow, that was great. Love Jose Quintana.
Our last one here, Joe. This one from Chris Capella. He said, just wanted to hear your general thoughts on the 2024 bullpen. I know there were some guys who were injured or optioned that we didn't see a lot of. Who can we expect to compete for spots next season that's already on the roster?
Yikes. Not much. Not much, if we're being totally honest. I do think, and I think I saw someone actually reply to Chris, and it was kind of like a little back and forth between people that just were in my mentions. I think we're kind of burying Drew Smith, maybe a little preemptively, despite clearly he hasn't had his best year. But it's home runs, the walks are up. But if you could somehow just get those home runs down a little bit, because despite where it feels like he's giving up home runs every other day, he still has a sub 4 ERA. In 2022, he had a 3.33 ERA. So I think a lot of people are talking about non-tendering Drew Smith. I would advise the Mets be very careful doing that. But I imagine he has to be competing for a spot. Maybe old favorite of the show, Bryce Montez de Oca, comes back from his Tommy John surgery. Yeah. So he had Tommy John again. So we'll see where he's at. But look, the bullpen right now has a lot of not going to be here next year. I mean, Brooks Raley's under contract. Adam Ottavino's under contract. So those two you expect should be back. Diaz will be back. But they need to sign multiple relievers. There's no way around it. They need probably 3 to 4 relievers for just the bullpen as it is. And then you need depth behind it. So there's a lot of tooling that'll need to be done. But Trevor Gott is under contract, so it's potential he's back. Grant Hartwig, who has shown some good things on and off, he can be back as depth. Jeff Brigham's still around, who's done some things here and there, but internally there's not a ton to look at unless David Peterson or Tyler McGill make a shift to the bullpen. That's something else that could be there. And I do want to shout out one prospect, which as we say on this show a lot, Connor, you don't tell me what the mailbag questions are going to be before you ask me. So I have no idea if you're going to get to this, but I did see someone respond. Paul Gervais is a guy to watch. He was LSU's closer. Mets drafted him, I believe, the 12th round. It was like 11th or 12th round in the 2022 draft. And he's now up in AA, and he's 6'10" or 6'11", throws up to 95 miles an hour, has missed a ton of bats. He's a little too skinny for that. I think that would be bad news if he played tackle, but he could be a supersized tight end, maybe that no one can cover.
Yeah.
But Paul Gervais, up to 95, misses a lot of bats. Still needs some work on his control, but as a reliever at the AA level, he's someone who's not crazy far away from the big leagues. And a cool story, transferred from a D3 school up to LSU, basically kind of like barely made the team and then elevated to being closer on one of the best teams in the country. And Paul Gervais is a name to just keep an eye on.
This is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. This summer, step out of the office and into the iconic with Cadillac, where the Made to Move sales event provides all the inspiration needed to set your email status to away. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac showroom for the Made to Move sales event today. And of course, subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch at SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.